Welcome to the Wisdom K podcast, your authentic mental health and self development podcast. Here, I share with you simple, sound, and well researched lessons that will help you to function at your optimum. I hope you will learn something new today. At the forecourt of an ancient Greek temple was the inscription, Know Thyself. This short but powerful statement is a key factor for living a life of purpose and fulfillment. Many of us do not know ourselves. We are walking through our daily lives without a strong sense of who we are. And that is why in today's episode of this podcast, I will begin to look at the topic, the self-concept. And this will be a two-part lesson. In this first part, we will try to understand what the self-concept means and why it is important. Now, in understanding the self, it is important for us to appreciate what self means. So when I talk about the idea of self, what are we referring to? Because without knowing and understanding this self, you will not be able to make the necessary adjustments, the necessary choices, and build the right relationships that will cause you to live a fully functioning life. The APA Dictionary of Psychology, APA standing for the American Psychological Association, defines the self, SELF, as the totality of the individual, consisting of all characteristic attributes, conscious and unconscious, mental and physical. In essence, when we talk about the self, we are referring to all those attributes that makes you you. The individual, the person, their attributes, the ones that they are conscious of, the ones that they are aware of, or the ones that they are unconscious of or not aware of. The ones that involve their mental capacity, their thinking, their memories, as well as those that are within their physical environment. All of this thing that makes the individual who they are in order to function within a society is what we are referring to as the self. And this is different from personality, which I will be talking about in a different episode where we'll discuss understanding personality. Gordon Allport, a very important figure in the history of psychology, describes the self as that which is consistent, unique, and central in the individual. The self is you. The self is that part that makes you a unique individual. So then what is the self-concept? The self-concept is also described by the APA Dictionary of Psychology as one's description and evaluation of themselves, including psychological and physical characteristics, qualities, skills, roles, and so forth. In essence, when we talk about your self-concept, which is sometimes also called the self-identity, we are talking about the idea or perception you have of yourself. So your idea, your perception of you yourself in light of both your personal traits, your personal belief systems, as well as the social or environmental factors that influence your life. Your self concept describes the beliefs that you have about yourself, as well as how you evaluate other people's perceptions and behaviors towards you. So, in essence, your self concept referring to an idea, a philosophy, a way of evaluation. Your self concept is how you evaluate yourself, how you think of yourself in light of personal attributes and how your environment interacts with you as you also interact with the environment. What are your beliefs? What are your thoughts concerning yourself and how others see you? That is your self concept. That is your self identity. And if you do not have this self identity, this concept of self, if it is not strong, then there is trouble. So, why is the self concept important? Why is the self concept important? Why is it necessary for you to have an identity, have a strong sense of self? A belief system that will help you to know and understand yourself and also determine and guide your interactions with your environment, both social and physical. Number one, a well developed self concept or self identity is necessary because it will help you to become self aware. And this self awareness we'll talk about in more detail in the next episode. But it helps you, if you have a sense of self, it helps you to become self aware, where you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, you know the things that trigger or threaten you, you know who you are, and in every situation, in your daily engagements, in whatever event that you find yourself in, you are able to do things in line with that self awareness, knowing that these are my limitations, these are my strengths, and in this particular situation, in this particular event, these are the things that I should and should not do. Self awareness is critical, and it depends on whether you have a strong self concept, a strong sense of self. Number two, a well developed self concept is necessary because it helps you to reflect on your actions and how you interact with other people. Remember, your self concept includes the beliefs that you have about yourself and your world. So, someone who has a well developed or strong sense of self is able to take time to reflect on their actions. And this is a build up on the self awareness, because if you are self aware, if, for instance, you do something and the other person complains, you are able to reflect on that action that is causing the trouble. If you take a step, you are able to get back to yourself to see whether that step was really the right one or not. Someone who does not have a self concept, a strong sense of self, cannot or will struggle to reflect on their own actions. And because of that, they will not be able to build a strong relationship with others. Number three, a well developed self concept is necessary because it helps you to properly and effectively evaluate the feedback that you receive from others. That is why it is important to know thyself. To know thyself. If you do not have a strong sense of self, an identity of self, you will struggle when people give you feedback, whether positive or negative. Your ability to accept feedback and the ones that are negative, be able to either ignore them or not allow them to push you away or push you down, is dependent on how much of yourself you know. So, self concept, having a strong sense of self, is important in how we take and evaluate feedback from others. What are the components of the self concept? We'll look at it from the perspective of a man called Carl Rogers. And Carl Rogers is one of the key figures when it comes to a school of psychology called the humanistic psychology. And he came up with a therapy approach called the person centered therapy or the client centered therapy. And in his ideas and his theories of self, the the main or central theme of Carl Rogers is that each one of us has abilities, each one of us has capacities, each one of us is endowed with a lot, and that all we are striving for is to become the best version of ourselves. However, there are conditions within our environment which may or may not hinder the development of our true self. And he talks about how in growing up, if we do not get the unconditional sense of regard, what he calls the unconditional positive regard, where we are loved, where we are cared for, where we are tended to, irrespective of our deficiencies, we will not be able to get a better sense of ourselves. And so it takes unconditional positive regard rather than conditional positive regard for you to see yourself in a good light and have the confidence to develop your true self. And Carl Rogers came up with three components of the self. So the self concept, he put it under three various components. He talks about the self image, the self ideal or the ideal self, and then self esteem. Self esteem, ideal self, and self image. What is the self image? Self image is simply how you see yourself in the moment. It is the mental picture you have of yourself. So when I look at myself, who do I see? So, how do you assess your physical traits? How do you assess your spiritual abilities, your social abilities? If the individual assesses their physical traits, their stature, and sees themselves as ugly, sees themselves as having flawed body shapes, they will begin to look down upon themselves. So the picture you have of yourself is your self image, the mental picture you have of yourself now. And this, at the end of the day, determines whether you have a good self esteem or a poor negative self esteem. So, what is the self esteem? Your self esteem is the personal sense of value or worth you place on yourself. So, do you feel competent? Do you feel needed? Do you feel you are beautiful or handsome? So, someone whose self image, when it comes to their physical stature, their physical look, is that they are ugly, this person will begin to feel that they don't belong. So, their esteem, the value, the personal sense of worth they place on themselves is negatively affected by the negative image they have of themselves. Then there is the ideal self. And the ideal self is the person that you wish you were. The ideal, the kind of person you are hoping to become or you wish that you were in the moment. It is that wishful part, that dreaming part, that hoping part of you. So the individual who wishes that they were fair, the individual who wishes that they were rich, they have an ideal self, a self that is in the future, a self that is not yet existent, that has the characteristics, the features that they wish they had now. So you will see that the self image, the ideal self, and the self esteem interacting together will determine how the individual lives a satisfying life. How you see yourself, your self image, what you wish you were that you are not at the moment, and how you place a value or sense of worth on yourself signify or describe your self concept. So there is a time where Carl Rogers will say there may be an incongruent self concept. And this is when, for instance, the individual self image does not align with their ideal self. So there's the reality on the ground, who they are now, what he describes as the real self that is short, the real self that is slim, the real self that is fair rather than dark or dark rather than fair, the real self that is not getting the kind of income you wish you were having. So the image the individual has of themselves, which is a poor self image, does not match with the kind of ideal that they have. And that leads to a sense of incongruence, and that will cause anxiety, that will cause a lot of frustration. But when the ideal self matches or aligns with the individual self image and the reality of their now moment, it leads to a sense of congruence. There is a sense of fulfillment, even if the individual does not have it all together. A lack of congruence within your concept of self significantly affects your self esteem. How does the self concept develop? We start developing our self concept or self identity right from birth, with this continuing through until you die. So, in childhood and especially in adolescence, which is described as the period of searching for an identity, we begin to have a sense of who we are. And this sense of who you are is affected by the exposure you get. The experiences of early childhood begin to give you an image of whether you are good, you are ugly, you are terrible, you are this and that and that. That image of self is influenced by the parenting style you are exposed to, the school you are exposed to, a number of things, including your personality, the traits that you have that may be biologically inclined or socially conditioned. So, from the early years of childhood through to the periods of adolescence, our sense or perception of self develops, especially as we explore ourselves and our environment, the physical environment, the social environment, and the spiritual environment. Your experiences shape the beliefs that you have. So there are some people that believe that they cannot become anything in life because right from childhood they kept hearing that they are good for nothing. So the voices they heard, the experiences they had, the harsh treatments that they had began to create that concept of self that is negative, and it affects their self-esteem and it affects their actions thereof. So your belief systems are shaped by the experiences even as you are growing, and your experiences, your interaction with the environment and others also affects your belief systems. And that is why it is said that the self concept is not static, it keeps changing. An identity of self, the sense of self, may change from negative to positive, from weak to strong, based on how the individual is exposed to different kinds of people, different experiences as they are growing. And that is critical. And that is something that is useful to us because it helps you to know that if you have not yet developed a proper, strong, well meaning self concept, and an, an identity, a strong sense of self, you can begin to develop that positive, strong sense of self. And in the next episode, we will be going into how you can develop a positive, strong, and healthy self concept. Let's wrap up with some ideas from a man called Jean Piaget, a very key figure in developmental psychology. And in his theory of cognitive development, he talks about how children, right from childhood, how we form mental templates that help you to interpret and understand your world. And he calls these mental templates schemas. So, as the child is born, as they are exposed to a mother that is caring, a father that is caring, an environment that is lovely, it's all about laughter and all that, they form a mental picture, a mental template that helps them to now begin to understand or interpret subsequent experiences. So, if right from the childhood, the templates that the child is forming are templates that tells them they are not good enough, templates that tell them that they are weak and they are not, they don't have the capacities and abilities as other people. You can imagine how they will go ahead to interpret new situations, new experiences in their life as they are growing. So the schemas that are formed right from childhood, whether positive or negative, whether it helps or it does not help, is important. John Bowlby, who is a key figure in attachment theory and developmental psychology, talks also about what he refers to as the child's internal working model. And this is similar to the template or the mental template, the schemas that Piaget talks about. However, with the internal working model, Bowlby says that it is characterized by three main things: a model of others as being trustworthy, a model of the self as being valuable, and a model of the self as being effective when interacting with others. So, right from childhood, when the child is exposed to parents that are abusive or parents that are caring, parents that are loving, when they go to the school environment, the kinds of experiences they have, all of this is creating within them a working model that helps them to assess whether other people can be trusted. Number two, whether they themselves, they are worthwhile, they are valuable to themselves and to the society. And thirdly, whether in interacting with others, they are effective and they have a place in society. So our self-concept develops right from childhood through to adolescence until the point where we die. But it is very, very significant, or it grows faster within the childhood and especially the adolescence years. So the concept you have of yourself is critical. And as we have mentioned, in the next episode, we would explore how you can work on improving or obtaining a more positive and healthy self concept. And we'll also talk about self awareness as a component of developing a better self concept. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you in the next episode next Sunday. Thank you for joining today's podcast episode. I hope you learned something new. Thank you and have a fruitful new week. Bye bye.